Hello, welcome. Good morning or good afternoon. My name is Augustina Ive. I am the Director of Clinical Services at KCSARC. I'm also one of the bilingual therapists here, and I'm honored to be here sharing space with all of you. I want to start by thanking our ASL interpreters, Laura and Alicia, and our Spanish language interpreter, Crystal. We have a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. If you need to hear the Spanish interpreter, choose the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen. Then choose Listen In and choose Spanish. And if you have any technical issues with this or anything else, please flag our team and put a message in the chat box and they'll be able to help you with any issues. And since I'm talking about interpretation, it would be useful to say this in Spanish. Si necesitan acceder a la interpretación simultánea en español, en la parte de abajo de la pantalla hay un botón que dice interpretación. Hacen clic en Listen In y seleccionan español, Spanish. Y si tienen alguna dificultad técnica con la interpretación o con cualquier otra cosa, por favor pongan un mensaje en el chat en español o en inglés y nuestro equipo va a hacer lo posible para ayudarlos. I want to begin by acknowledging something that we all know. These are very challenging times. We're living in a moment when rhetoric around immigration has grown increasingly harsh, when entire communities, and particularly our Hispanic neighbors, friends, and family members ourselves, face demonization and dehumanization in our public discourse. And yet, here we are, here you are. You've chosen to show up, to learn, to engage with one another in the most critical and overlooked intersection of this crisis, how immigration enforcement affects survivors of sexual abuse. That choice, your presence here today, matters deeply. The conversation we're about to have is not abstract. It's about very real people facing impossible choices. And I am profoundly grateful and honored to be a part of a bilingual and bicultural team that we call Dando, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. And I am particularly thankful to two members of our team who agreed to join me for a panel. In just a moment, we'll bring on our bilingual therapist, Claudia, and our bilingual legal advocate, Kimberly. Each of them brings extraordinary expertise, but more than that, they bring deep compassion and unwavering commitment to some of our most vulnerable and marginalized community members. They support survivors who navigate not just the aftermath of abuse, but also the many complexities and intricacies of the justice system and an increasingly hostile immigration system. And their insights are not academic or theoretical. What they're about to share comes from years of listening and standing alongside survivors, advocating for and empowering those who need champions the most. So again, to everyone joining us today, thank you. Thanks for your engagement, your open hearts, your commitment to creating communities where every survivor, regardless of their immigration status, can access safety, justice, and healing. And Abigail, can you please bring in Claudia and Kimberly now? And one last thing for our participants. We will have time at the end for a few questions, so feel free to put them in the chat for our team, and we'll get to as many of those questions as we can. So, and we're ready to start this important conversation. So Kimberly, Claudia, thanks so much for being here today. Claudia, Kimberly, and I, together with a number of other KCSARC staff, are proud members of what we call Dando, the group of bilingual and bicultural staff across all of our advocacy and therapy services who serve our Latinx clients in both English and Spanish. 29% of our clients identify as Hispanic, Latino, Latinx, And Dando as a program assisted over 650 clients last year alone. And it is one of KCSARC's fastest growing programs. And I want to point out that our services in Spanish are not a mere translation of our services in English. We take great pride on serving our Latinx clients in ways that are actually culturally relevant and that highlight the many strengths they bring in. Many of our Dandavos clients are immigrant themselves or have close family members who are. And we're talking about incredibly resilient survivors who have historically faced many barriers and who now have had new and tremendous barriers placed in front of them. So Claudia, I'll turn it to you first. You're a clinical social worker and you have been working with survivors of sexual violence across the lifespan for several years. As a therapist, can you speak to the impact of sexual abuse and assault both in the short and long term?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that introduction, Agustina, and thank you everybody for being here. Some of the most common symptoms of trauma that we see in our clients are things like intrusive thoughts or re-experiencing of the traumatic event, avoidance of the reminders of the trauma, negative thoughts about themselves, others, or the world, which can very easily lead to depression or symptoms of depression. Hypervigilance of their surroundings is also a good one. This heightened fear response is very pronounced in our clients. Also, the increase in overall distress that can lead to things like self-harm and suicide ideation. Any existing anxiety or depression symptoms can be exacerbated, as well as any other mental health issues that are already present in the survivor. There are also some physical impacts of trauma, things like trouble sleeping, trouble concentrating, poor appetite, or actually eating too much as a form to cope. We do hear a lot about body aches, just physical, not feeling well, physical symptoms, rapid heartbeats, shortness of breath, chest pains, stomach problems, headaches, just to name a few. You can imagine how impeding that would be for day-to-day life, right? In addition to the mental health and physical symptoms or impacts of trauma, there's also interpersonal impacts as well in people's lives. So a survivor might experience difficulty forming new relationships or maintaining current ones with others in their circle. There's also more difficulty or increased difficulty in self-care and taking care of their just daily living tasks, right? Either school or work focus. There can be an increase of maladaptive coping skills like drugs and alcohol use. And all of these symptoms can linger for months or even years if not properly treated.
And we know that culture obviously shapes the way we experience the world.
Mm-hmm.
Based on the literature and on your own clinical experience, how do some aspects of Hispanic Latino culture shape the way survivors may experience these reactions to trauma and to sexual assault in particular?
Yeah, so what we know, particularly about the Latinx community, there are a lot of case management needs. So there's just a lot of barriers to overcome aside from the trauma itself, right? There are cultural and societal expectations in the Latinx community that could also impact the trauma and recovery from it. And unfortunately, there still is a stigma around mental health. Um, and so that can prove to be a very big barrier in accessing help or seeking help, right? There's sometimes the value of family, right? Obligation to family, the idea that I have to be okay, right? A lot of people depend on me and I cannot not be okay, right? I can't take some time off to take care of this. And so just kind of that mindset of pushing through it as opposed to kind of stopping and trying to recover from something traumatic. In the midst of all that, like I mentioned earlier, there are these case management needs and barriers, things like housing, access to food, or I should say lack of access to food, lack of access to proper medical care. Sometimes there's childcare needs, employment needs, transportation, etc. Right? And so as a person is trying to navigate all of these different systems that exist in this country with a language and a cultural barrier, plus the stigma that exists in the culture, it can be really isolating for the Latinx communities. And it becomes increasingly difficult to focus on one thing, right? Or to focus on the trauma, which is oftentimes something that occurred in the past, right? While in the present, there are still some very basic and survival needs that need to be met also. So in therapy, we see lots of times that the focus for a Latinx client will shift between processing the trauma and what are my daily needs now? What does my family need me to do right now?
Thanks, Claudia. And Kimberly, I'll turn it to you now. As a legal advocate, you know very well that Latinx survivors face additional barriers to speaking out and disclosing or reporting sexual assault. What are some of those barriers?
Yeah, I think it's really important to remember that for so many of our clients and for survivors, English and Spanish aren't necessarily their first or even second language. We have a lot of survivors where they're in their country of origin, there are numerous, hundreds of different languages. And it can be really difficult to report or be able to explain what happened and then have to work alongside interpreters who may not be able to fully interpret what happened to them. A lot of times, because of the language barrier, they might not be able to say exactly what happened in the way that will actually encompass the assault that happened. A lot of times, our survivors also have fear of the systems that they have to work in. When someone makes a report, you have to work alongside law enforcement. A lot of times with CPS, the criminal justice system is filled with different systems that historically marginalize this community in general.
And for Latinx survivors who are immigrants themselves or whose close family members are, the fears and risks are escalated right now, right? What have you noticed when working with these clients?
We see all kinds of offenders. We see offenders who are immigrants themselves, and we also see survivors that are immigrants that are being abused by citizens of the United States. There are a lot of times that abusers can use their privilege of being a citizen and being a native English speaker against our clients. We have clients that are scared to report because their family members and the abusers are undocumented themselves and they don't necessarily want to see them get deported. There's this fear of reaching out to law enforcement because they're not aware of who they work alongside with and whether reporting means that they themselves will get deported. Then there's also this fear of being separated from their family. A lot of times our cases do involve CPS, and we have parents of survivors that are scared that they will be separated from their children because they weren't there to protect them, or they have this idea that because they weren't there to protect them, like they will be punished and they will be separated from their children.
Mm-hmm. And Claudia, you mentioned earlier that most immigrant survivors live in this heightened and constant state of fear and stress on top of the trauma, which makes it much less likely that they will report or seek help. What are you hearing from the community and from the clients that do reach out for support?
Yeah, so some of the things we hear, there's still fear, right? Even though they do reach out for support, there's still fear around their safety. A lot of the stuff that Kimberly mentioned, right? Threats to their own well-being or the well-being of a loved one, right? That reporting will get them or their family in trouble somehow. there's also fear from the retaliation of the abuser, right? Again, as Kimberly mentioned, that's still something that we hear a lot. The risk of not being believed, or the fear of not being believed, is also really big for our survivors. Not being believed by family, by friends, by law enforcement when making a report, or by their communities, especially in the Latinx community. Community is very important, and family is very important. So the fear there is very big. Thoughts about, is there something that I did to provoke this this attack? You know, will others think that I did something to provoke? And so in that sense, we do kind of get into some of the gender roles that happen, right? The idea that, you know, women are supposed to behave a certain way and not do certain things, or go to certain places. And if so, then maybe there is part fault there. And even with men, right? Once sexual violence occurs to a man, there are also questions and thoughts and fears around sexuality, strength, right, masculinity, and all of those ideas and thoughts and fears it's what we're hearing from people who come. In the Latinx community specifically too, there are currently ideas in the public discourse of the character and trustworthiness of people who are undocumented or immigrants, right? And I have heard clients share, I don't want to be a burden to the system, right? I want to kind of keep my head down, come here, work, to, cross my T's and dot my I's, and I don't want to get into issues. And so that could be another kind of paired with the fear that we're seeing.
Yeah, that makes sense. This idea that no place feels safe and there's nowhere to turn because we feel under siege.
Yeah.
Kimberly, anything you would add to that?
Yeah, I think it's also important to note that so many of our clients have been abused by people that they know and have some sort of relationship with. A lot of times our victims are dependent on their abuser for basic necessities, shelter and food and healthcare, and just access to other, family members. And, culturally, family is just such a strong community that a lot of times it can be really scary to report someone who is a part of your family. We have different power dynamics that we are seeing. A lot of times, an abuser might be seen as more reliable because they might be a caretaker, or again, they have the privilege of understanding the English language in a way that our clients don't. Like I mentioned, a lot of times immigration status can be used against our clients. So there's this fear of reporting and what that might mean to them if they will get in trouble for reporting. A lot of times, a lot of our survivors are not aware that what happened to them is a form of abuse, especially when they're younger. They think that what happened to them may be normal, and they may minimize what happened to them, or might not think that it's something that's reportable because it happened so long ago. Um, so we see a lot of different reasons why people might not report.
And Kimberly, as a legal advocate, what do you and your colleagues see happening in the legal system in our community right now? What has changed?
I think we've seen that, unfortunately, because there have been a lot of cases that have not been reported due to fear, we see that a lot of abusers face no accountability. A lot of times, our clients are not the first people to be victimized. They might be the second, third, or fourth, and they might not be aware that they're not the only people that have been victimized. And as a result, abusers are able to do it to other people. For others, we see that abuse isn't just a one-time thing. It tends to escalate over time. And if our if survivors are not able to report, we see that a lot of times what may have started off as something may have escalated with time. Abuse also tends to spread through community. If someone sees that they're able to groom a victim, it's easier to be able to groom others, knowing that nothing is stopping them and that the justice system hasn't stopped them before. So yeah, a lot of times not reporting, unfortunately, does mean that survivors stay distressed and are not able to talk about what happened to them. These are just a number of impacts that we see when survivors aren't in a position where they feel comfortable enough to report.
And in terms of the legal proceedings and the way current immigration enforcement is playing out, what are some of the impacts that you're noticing?
Yeah, Washington State is a pretty progressive state. However, law enforcement here can't intervene when when immigration gets enforced, especially because all of the legal proceedings that we work with are public information. It is not difficult to just look up the name of a defendant or find a case or find when the next court hearing is. And a lot of our clients are scared to go to hearings in person. Historically, because of COVID, a lot of our hearings were done over Zoom, and it was a safe space where someone could participate from, the safety of their home. But that's changing now. We are outside of organizations losing funding and resources. You see that across in the criminal system as well. And now there aren't necessarily the means to be able to just provide Zoom links for clients. A lot of times, victims are choosing to refrain from participating because they feel like they just are not safe when they go. They're not safe participating, and they also don't necessarily have the means to be able to participate. If we have a survivor that was assaulted in the state, but they now live out of the state and they're needed to be available in person, they don't necessarily have a real ID to come to Washington and participate in their court hearing. Unfortunately, a lot of times, because our clients seem to be disengaged due to their fears, prosecutors may choose to take a plea as a resolution, thinking that our clients don't care anymore about their case and not understanding that they are actually putting their physical safety first. Unfortunately, we also have seen that, many of our clients have gotten detained, and we've also seen defendants get detained as well. And as a result, the victims are not able to get a sense of justice because their court proceedings have been cut short. And again, it's one of those things where a lot of times our clients have to choose what's best for them in that moment.
And to both of you, Claudia and Kimberly, what other concerns are you hearing from survivors?
We're definitely hearing that there's like a disruption in healing and justice for a lot of our survivors. The Latinx community is a very resilient community, but recently have been facing some escalating barriers, which are proving to be insurmountable in this moment, right? So again, in therapy, we're seeing clients who are just opting to not continue with therapy or are starting to miss a lot of appointments because of stress or need for vigilance in the home. And they're just kind of wanting to, like mentioned earlier, to kind of focus on some of like the basic survival things. So yeah, their healing process is being interrupted.
We see just fear, ongoing fear with everything that's happening across the nation. We have clients who have seen family or friends get detained, even if they're US citizens, just based on the color of their skin or the language that they speak. There's this general fear of just participating within our systems and interacting with the systems. And unfortunately, we also see that a lot of our clients are no longer being able to be supported the way that they have been historically. Grants and funding have been cut across the nation, and our partner organizations, we see that we're not able to support our clients in the way that we have been in the past. We also see that a lot of times the cases that are being prosecuted take a lot longer than they have been historically because of funding that's been cut across the criminal justice system and Superior Court. Another example, a lot of times protection order hearings can go on for several months because of funding cuts to law enforcement. They don't have the capacity to be able to serve respondents, and we see time and again multiple cases that just end up getting dismissed because our clients just don't have the capacity to wait anymore for a sense of justice.
And as members of these communities that are being targeted, our staff, we ourselves are also being very directly impacted by the recent immigration policies and the current climate and everything going on. We're not immune to any of this. Can you speak to that on either a personal or more general level, how we are being impacted by everything going on?
Yeah, I can go first. I think that one of the biggest impacts that I've seen, that I've noticed in both myself and colleagues, is just this, there's no real remedy right now. There's no real solution. Things are changing very quickly, and every day could be a new piece of news, a new policy or something that's going on. And it's difficult to sort of catch up and be in the know and wanting to offer resources and help to our clients when our own resources are also dwindling. And so being in a helper position, right? We're all here because we want to help people, and then feeling helpless in these moments can be really tough. Yeah, that's what I've experienced. Kimberly?
Yeah, I mean, being part of the Dando team does mean that, us as advocates are being directly impacted in our personal lives, having to balance supporting our clients and being there and being present for them, and then going home and experiencing the same, similar things is really, really difficult. Like Claudia mentioned, we have dwindling resources, so we're all being spread thin, trying to do more than what we have been doing historically. We're not able to make referrals the way that we were used to. And being a part of this system, a lot of times we are the last resource for our clients, and they are hopeful coming in that we are there to fix and be able to support them to the best of our ability, and be there so that they can get a sense of justice. And that's not something that we can guarantee. Unfortunately, we have to be transparent with our clients and let them know that a lot of times what they would love to see happen is not physically possible.
And yet all of this is very heavy. And among the noise and the turmoil and the heaviness, what gives you hope? What sustains you these days as we get through these very difficult times?
I think for me, one of the things that I have heard recently from a community member who is a little bit older and has been sort of around in the fight for a little bit longer was that this isn't our first hurdle or challenge as a community, right? Like we've been here before. And though it might look a little bit different today, we've been able to persevere and overcome in the past because we have a lot of strengths in our community and we are very resilient as a people. So for me personally, just kind of keeping that in mind as I experience my own burnout, right, with everything that's going on, and also finding each other, right, finding other helpers, um, communicating and connecting with others who are also um, trying their best, right, to kind of stay above water, but also help others, right? So finding the helpers. And then lastly, I think for me, particularly important is resting, and the idea of rest as resistance to preserve energy and kind of live to fight another day, so to speak. Um, those really three things are something that I'm continuously circulating in my head. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's amazing to constantly see how tight-knit our community is, how the Latinx community is there for one another at large. I'm really sorry, I don't know what happened with my lights right now. But just seeing the resiliency in our community and seeing how everyone is trying to support one another through all of this. I've seen so much mutual aid. I've seen community events happen and they get organized so quickly. It's also amazing to see future generations and what they're doing. Just seeing younger folks be there to support one another and be there to support older generations, and see all of the work that they're doing. It is um, amazing to feel taken care of in that way, in knowing that younger generations are constantly working to have a better future as well.
Mhm.
Thanks for sharing those rays of hope and which I share with you too. And I want to add, and sort of to illustrate what you just said, something that I got to witness and experience and actually be a part of recently. We do a lot of work in the community, and we were meeting with a group of families, Latinx families, all of them immigrant families. And we had, at the most recent meeting, we had the largest turnout we've ever had, showing that people are resilient. Like they keep showing up. They may be scared, but they know that they can get through this. And the whole conversation was around how to support their children, so that they can, transition into young adulthood, go to college, find meaningful jobs, looking at the future, knowing that the community is strong enough, that we have each other, and this strong sense of hope is sustaining me as we get ourselves through this, because we will get to the other side of this. And I see that we have plenty of time for some questions and comments. So our team is sending us some of those questions. I see one here. I work with someone who is a survivor. How can I refer them to KCSARC? And Kimberly or Claudia, what would you say?
Yeah, we
How
have
can the folks get connected? Yeah, sorry.
we have the 24-hour resource line. You can always look us up just at ksarc.org. I'll have all of the information about how to make a referral. We have the Dando voice line, so that is the Spanish speaking line as well. And you're also always welcome to send an email to our intake team as well.
And we are on social media as well. A lot of Latinx clients use Facebook a lot, as well as Instagram. And we have our dedicated phone line. during business hours, 8 to 5. And I think our team will drop it in the chat, 425-282-0324, and either Marisol or Andrea will pick up the line in Spanish and be there to support clients. We're hearing from national leaders all sorts of horrific things about immigrants, including things like rapists are coming to this country to harm us. Do you have more insight or examples of how immigrants are actually being targeted by citizens in this country? That's a great question. Kimberly, maybe from, more of a legal angle, what would you say to this?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times, again, like I mentioned earlier, our clients aren't being targeted just by the color of their skin or just being heard talking a different language outside of English. And, that happens a lot in court, where there will be people waiting and just there to detain them regardless of what their actual immigration status is. A lot of times we have also heard people say that they are only they're falsely reporting so that they can get visa immigration support, either through trafficking visas or U visas, and that's not true. People don't tend to just report, like people just don't report just as a lie. People report because it's something that happened to them. It's a very vulnerable thing to do, having to talk to someone, essentially strangers, multiple times, and people don't just do that because they want to get some sort of status here in the US.
Yeah, and to add to that, and you mentioned earlier that a lot of the times immigration status is weaponized and used against the victims. There are no reliable statistics, but it's likely that a lot of incidents by citizens may not be reported because of this weaponizing, like this leverage that offenders may have against their victims. So it's a myth that we want to very loudly dispel. And to add to the cultural component, and that weaponizing status or identity, because family is so key to Latino culture. If the offender is from within the family, that'll be used like you're bringing the family apart if you report. But if the offender is from outside the family and outside the culture, which is very often the case, that will be weaponized as you're betraying your family and your culture. So that's an additional barrier to reporting and disclosing.
Yeah, I just want to add really quickly to all of that. Offenders come in all shapes and sizes and shades, right? Just like survivors. We do have some statistics, but a lot of times because of the culture of sexual violence and a lot of the silence and shame that surrounds it, right? We know that there are a lot of people who don't report for some of the reasons that Agustina just said, right? So if you look at some of the national numbers, right, a vast majority of offenders are male, for example, right? That doesn't mean that there are no female offenders, or if that the number of female offenders is not greater, but it can be sort of entrenched in societal and cultural expectations about reporting against a female offender. So there's a lot of sort of complexity around all of that, but we do know that offenders come in all shapes, sizes, and shades.
Such good points. Thank you. And this question kind of goes back to the previous one. In general, if someone called our resource line, what should they expect when dialing on a number?
Yeah, I can answer that one. They will get an advocate who has been trained and has gone and undergoes yearly training, who's there to validate and support you. If you call the resource line, people are there just to hear you out and see what you need outside of emotional support. If you need resources, if you need to hear more about our services, they're more than happy to talk about that with you. We offer therapy services, we offer legal advocacy, we also offer groups, like parental groups if you're a parent of a survivor and you just need support with how to better support your child. Those are things that the resource advocates can answer. And they also have resources to other organizations outside of KCSARC that can help as well.
And it'll be a warm space. They will be believed because we always start by believing.
Yeah. And advocates also start off by letting callers know that, the caller's there to lead the conversation. If they just need silence and they just need someone on the line there, advocates can do that. But yeah, like ultimately just the caller is a person who leads the conversation and, hopefully they find what they need when they call.
Thank you. We have a few more minutes for one last question. Is there anything local governments can do to provide more support to survivors, especially undocumented survivors and survivors who speak English as a second or third or fourth language? What do we want to say to local governments?
I think just an overall action that anybody can do, right, is to show your support for survivors, right? Our tagline, our motto here at KCSARC is "Be Loud," right? So having fellow community members or city representatives, county representatives stand alongside us by being loud and talking about these issues and offering welcoming spaces to survivors. I think that also goes a long way, especially in the current climate when, again, there's just a lot of fear, a lot of uncertainty about where does the support lie, who's actually here to support us. So showing that, being visible and being loud about it.
Yeah. And a big part of it is funding, and it's been a recurring theme in your answers that resources are dwindling, that resources we had always counted on are no longer there at pretty much every level. So what we can do as community members is like pick up the phone, open up your email, and contact your legislators, your council members, and your city officials to let them know that this is a pressing issue. That showing up for our communities means funding the services they need. I'm going to get on a little bit of a soapbox here, but these community members that are being targeted right now, they are pillars of our communities. They're meaningful, important members of our communities. These are folks who are resourceful enough that they made it across a border. They are building lives for their families. They're providing, working 2, 3 jobs, showing up for their families, like at this community event I just mentioned. These are the people you would want on your team. And we need to have policymakers know that. So I encourage all of you to take action. We'll have a few minutes before the top of the hour where you can actually do that. Take action and make change happen, because there are very few avenues we can express ourselves in these times, and what we can do is limited sometimes, but this is something that we can meaningfully do. So I'm going to leave you all with that. And I don't know if Kimberly or Claudia have any closing remarks. We're almost at the end of our time together today.
Just thank you everyone for being here, for showing up, for the community, for wanting to learn more about these issues, and your presence is appreciated, and your work with the community is appreciated. Thank you.
Everything that Claudia said. Thank you so much.
Thanks again for being here, for simply showing up. You will receive a follow-up email with a link to a recording of this webinar. Thank you, Claudia and Kimberly. Thank all of our colleagues, particularly our Dando's co-workers at KCSARC. And thanks for sharing this space with us. This is part of what being in community means. And take good care. Keep fighting the good fight.